Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an instructive game to share with you from the Top Chess Engine Championship, Season 25 Superfinal. This is Game 3 between Leela ChessNetwork on the white end and Stockfish. This one was played on October 11th, and there are a few miniature positional lessons to take away from it. The opening, King's Indian Defense. Pay special attention to the King Knight. This is one of the things I found instructive with this game, how Leela maneuvers the King Knight in the Sämisch variation. We're not quite at the start position of this one. 8 moves are played before we reach that start position. I'll just be making some light notes until we get there, this being the first. Once black exerts pressure on d4, if white's going to support that point, it should be with the knight. The King Knight. If instead of the King Knight you go with the bishop, black would enjoy this tempo. Knight c6, and the bishop is going to have to move, or at least should move here. So we can say knight g to e2, white supports d4 with the fearless minor piece. No problems now if there's a capture. And knight c6, we would continue to develop. In the game, it is castles, bishop g5, c6, and after a couple queen moves, we reach our start position. Stockfish has just unpinned the knight. First move of the game is d5, space for Leela on the queen side. Black's approach is to try and overtake this invasive pawn by chipping away at the queenside structure. So a6 and b5 is right around the corner. How to continue from here? Let's have a look at the King Knight right away. It no longer serves a useful role on e2. There's no capture on d4 to worry about, nothing to support anymore. Currently, it's simply boxed out by a silly pawn. It's time to reposition. Plus, the light square bishop wants to have a move. King Knight drifts towards the queen side, has an eye on both b3 and d3. In the event of b5, it likes to follow up knight b3 with tempo. In this game, the queen goes back voluntarily, and the knight arrives on d3. Both white knights are on excellent squares. If we consider the key 16 squares on the board, let's key in on this guy, though. What role or roles does it serve? A couple squares come to mind for me. Currently, watches over c5. That's nice because black's queen knight may want to pivot there one day. And also, it watches over f4. Black's king knight may want to pivot there in some cases. Okay, anything else? Well, after black carries on with this idea to break down white's queenside structure after b5 is in, we can note something more. Right now, there's no worry of any lines where b4 is played to kick the knight away. Watches over b4. The continuation is to take on b5. Black takes towards the center. And this guy is not done moving. It goes to b4. Increases the pressure on c6. What's going to happen soon? d5 is going to open up for one of these knights. Also, one of black's pawns is going to fall. Okay, we continue. Bishop d7, bishop takes knight, recapture, capture on c6, knight takes c6, knight b to d5, kicks the queen back home to defend the bishop. Let's pause for a moment. 16 moves in, a lot of king knight moves so far. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where do we go from here? How would you continue in this position? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, instructive moment in the game. You would think, let's keep the knight on this d5 square. It's almost always going to be a terrible idea to trade this knight for this dark square bishop, what's considered a bad bishop, but there's a concrete reason why white does make this exchange right here. Let's see what that reason is. Let's see what happens if you don't take the bishop here and instead, let's say, develop a new piece and take the b pawn. There's this check on h4 that's irritating. You don't want to go uncastled. And if you play g3, black can now pounce on this weakness, the weakness of the last move. There's knight d4. How are you defending f3? Let's say bishop e2. How are you dealing with this diagonal? f4. Okay, this here is as far as I'm going to take it. You could see, you could kind of feel, really, the compensation for the pawn. We have an invasive light square bishop in white's camp, a knight as well. Not so easy to get rid of these pieces. There's a pin here as well. And how comfortable is it for white to have these pawns both up a step when there's still all of these pieces on board? There has only been one exchange so far. How to prevent this active play by black? Well, you swipe the bishop. You eliminate bishop h4 check. White won't have to play g3. Queen takes knight. Only now do you take on b5. Rook c8. Castles, no fear of knight d4 here. The bishop would hang. Bishop e6. Pop quiz, what would you play here? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, in the game it's bishop takes knight. If you swipe another pawn, this knight gets to d4. It likes this as a second best idea to take the pawn, but now how are you getting rid of this knight? You could very easily see this knight cause you problems. So you just swipe the knight. A simple approach. Don't even allow a black piece to be maintained on your side of the board. Bishop takes knight it is. White is up the pawn, and we're playing a knight versus bishop position. Rook on f to c1. Queen d8. Nearby, there's queen b6 check. When that check is in there, how to react to it? Let's say you were forced to make a king move. You certainly don't want to go towards the center. There's follow-up checks. There's still way too many pieces around to move towards the center. And you really don't want to go to the corner either, although that would be the better choice of the two. What's best of all is the h2 square. And white is very timely here, is in a spot to meet the check with king h2. That is the coziest square for the king. h3 on board, rook b8, king h2, queen a5, a3 preps, b4, looking to get this connected, looking to get the connected pass pawns rolling. Black stops that. And let's see how to reposition the pieces. There really isn't a way for black to break down the A, B, C files. There's only one point white has to watch over, and that is B2. Right now there is this threat to trap the rook, so the queen is out of the way, so the rook can move. Okay, we have all rooks on the C file. Rook D2, bishop B3, stopping the doubling. Queen F2, H5, H4. Yeah, you really don't want this pawn to be established on H4. Not that it was a threat right away, but H4 on board. Fix this pawn on a light square. Rook B8. Now, this leaves black tactically vulnerable. We're going to have a pair of rooks exchanged here. Knight A2 is the follow-up. No time for bishop takes knight. There would be rook takes on c6. I questioned, what are we doing if these rooks stay trained on the c file? How does white make progress here? Just want to give you a feel for how you can play as white if there's two rooks on board. It suggests getting off of the c file and then trying to stack the rooks like this. Can't go to the d1 square. Also, there is this idea, and that is an f4 break. These are ways forward for white. Okay, in the game, we get a pair of rooks exchanged and also a queen exchange. So the D pawn is now a C pawn, and this guy helps defend against the connected passers from rolling. How to approach this? We need to get the king involved. Currently, this is a passive versus active rook. Well, active. There is some activity, but it has this defensive role. White's approach here is to have the king babysit the B pawn so that the rook is free to do some other stuff. So we get this little king walk towards the queen side. The knight is also in a spot to stop any disruptive c3 move to break up the pawn duo. Knight on c3. Maintain the pawn on h4. If white initiates this capture, you could maybe at some stage see the king go to g6. Maybe there's g5, king g5, king f4 at some stage. By maintaining this pawn here, this is under control, this is under control, these two are occupied, there's no progress for the king on the king side of the board. So it is simply g3, a4, here goes the white king to watch over the b pawn. Now this rook is free. Passed pawn is created on the e file for black, but white already has the passer. The a pawn takes a step. We have a check, continues to advance right around the corner, possible fork ideas with promotion. Rook c8, knight b6, rook g8, and the follow-up here is knight takes on c4. I wondered, why not just push a7 here? Isn't it just going to be a rook for pawn exchange soon enough? This is a way you could go, but do know that there is this pesky e3 move, and we have the rook hit, and the bishop is a step away now from controlling that promotion square. So the approach here is to grab the c4 pawn, stop this advance. There are connected passers. They're a bit away, but okay, the a pawn ends up getting tracked down eventually. Meanwhile, this rook goes after the center pawns. Important to not only defend the knight in this position, but get out of the pin as well. If you go here instead, there's e3. So king b3, rook a8, we get the check. White gives up the a pawn, but goes hunting for the others, and will soon be back to up 2 pawns here. Grabs the h pawn. So before it was just the a3 and b2 pawn connected passers. Now we have h4 and g3. And any time white is given to advance the pawns, starts pushing the pawns. Not too difficult a technique from here. There's only one critical moment to touch on coming up. This is a 95 move game. Just one critical moment ahead, and it's pretty clean. So in the game, it is rook a1 here. If the rook goes after the g pawn, simple enough, we can defend. Rook a1. After rook h7, I wondered, well, wait a second. If the rook goes to g1 now, how are we defending this guy exactly? There's a threat here. After the rook is on the 7th rank, if the rook goes after the g pawn, we don't have to spend any time defending the pawn. This bishop will be won. With a check, doesn't matter where the king goes. The knight goes to f6 next, with check defending the rook, and there goes the bishop. This helps explain why rook f1 is played. There is no knight maneuver to f6 now. We continue with b4, improve the king. This is the last critical moment of the game. There's only one winning continuation. I wonder if you can spot it. Feel free to pause the video. Okay, in the game it is knight g6. If you try some other square, for instance, knight c6, there's rook f3, and this pawn is going to fall. This is considered a draw. B4 we can take. What happens if the knight goes to D7? The king could go to G8, target the rook, and right around the corner, there's this fork idea. So it is knight G6, check. King G8 met with the counterattack, rook E7. Some defense of the bishop, knight E5, bishop D5, and the pawns just get rolling basically at this stage. King, perfect blockader. The knight also watches out for two possible pivots by the rook. Nice and cozy for white. And these pawns simply continue to roll, gaining steam with check. Nice little wall formed here just in time to stop a check. No great king advances in this position. All right, let's see these final moves. Two connected pass pawns on the 6th now. A funny move coming up, blocking the check with knight D3. Not sure why exactly. You can make basically any other move. Okay, rook takes knight with check. There's no good follow-up check here. No pawn advance either. Plenty of ways to do it at this stage. Some silly checks thrown in. And there's a queen. And we get this funny move. I've seen this one before with these engine games. You ready? Queen D8. Giving away the queen so that we could get another queen with check, landing a skewer. Okay. We get just a few more moves in after rook C6 and queen takes. Rook brings us to a table-based win for white. What did you think of this one? Anyhow, feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.